Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I'm here to do a review on a classic, a movie that I love, that I feel was really underappreciated when it first came out, but over the years has really um, become a beloved classic by people of my generation. Uh, and that is, at least what's going on, that is Hook. Um, it came out in 1991. It it starred the late great Robin Williams, as well as Dustin Hoffman and Bob Hoskins. Dustin Hoffman as Hook, Bob Hoskins as Smee, and it was directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, what is Hook? For those that don't know, for those who haven't, and also Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell. For those who don't know what Hook is or what it's about, going into a little bit of the background, it was it was written by a man named Jim V. Hart and another gentleman called Nick Castle. And the planning for it goes all the way back to 1985. See, Steven Spielberg, we talked about him before on the Star Wars review, and the Star Wars cast and review intersects with this. But he's basically the friend of George Lucas, the close friend. They went to college together, and they were part of that new generation of directors, like I said. But when he was a child, he fell in love with um, the play Peter and Wendy. He did a school production of that of the based on the 1924 play Peter and Wendy, which itself is based on J.M. Barrie's book, 1911 book on the life of Peter Pan. So, given that Spielberg fell in love with that story, he always wanted to make that movie when he got older, and he became successful in the 70s. He did Jaws. In the 80s, he did Indiana Jones. Basically one of the best movie directors of all time. And he always wanted to do it, right, as a musical initially. And the person that he had in mind to star, and he wanted to do the original story, Peter Pan. The person that he had in mind to star in the movie was Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson at this time was on top of the world. He was the biggest celebrity in all of entertainment, and he was very childlike in his public persona. In fact, they were calling him the next Peter Pan because, for those who don't know, Peter Pan is based on a boy who never grew up. David says Robin Williams is his favorite. So he originally wanted Michael Jackson for the role, and it was supposed to be a musical, and it was supposed to be based on the original Peter Pan. But what happened was Steven Spielberg had a child that same, like the following year. So he put that notion of making Peter Pan in the back of his mind. And he got older and he focused on more serious films like Schindler's List, for example, right? Like The Color Purple, the adaptation of Alice Walker's book, right? In the late 80s, in the mid 80s. So he basically always wanted to do it, but he never got the chance. Finally, it was passed on to Nick Castle. Nick Castle was the director of The Last Starfighter. He also starred in John Carpenter's 1978 Halloween, 78 Halloween and 79. The original Halloween was 1 and 2 as Michael Myers. So he took on the project and he wanted to change it. He changed the idea and the concept. He said, what if Peter Pan grew up? So he developed a screenplay based on that idea, him and Jim V. Hart. The idea that Peter Pan becomes an adult. What if Peter Pan, the character, actually somehow grew up? What would he be like as an adult? Would he be any different, right? So that was the concept. So eventually, somehow, it gets back to Steven Spielberg. By 1991, Steven Spielberg wants to do it again, and he finally signs on to do it again. And this time, he doesn't get Michael Jackson because this is 1991. Michael Jackson has kind of fallen out of favor with a lot of people. He's not as popular as he was in the 80s. So he decides to get Robin Williams to play the role, which of course angered Michael Jackson to no end, even caused Michael to diss Spielberg in a song. They don't care about us is a diss to Steven Spielberg because of this reason. Um, but Robin Williams is initially hesitant because Robin Williams, although starting off as a comedian on the show Mork and Mindy, kind of by the 1990s had kind of tried to transition with roles like the Dead Poets Society into more serious. Yeah, yeah, Lisa. Into I know David. Yeah, Mike Tyson and Stone Cold. Yeah. Um, tried to transition into more serious roles. So he didn't really want to do it. And another reason Robin Williams didn't want to initially do it at first was because in 1981, Robin Williams had done a film adaptation with Shelley Long of Popeye. And that movie, Popeye, starring Robin Williams as Popeye, is one of the worst movies ever made. So he figured, you know what? I'm leaving these classics alone. I'm just gonna stick to newer roles. I don't want to be associated with any of these classics because, as Will Smith himself found out when he did Disney's live action remake Aladdin, when you mess with classics, sometimes fans don't really like it. So Robin Williams was hesitant, but eventually they convince Robin, and he goes for the role, and he becomes the adult Peter Pan. Um, and Dustin Hoffman, he was in The Graduate. He was in a lot of other films. He's a great actor. He was always considered for the role of Hook, even when it was initially Peter Pan, the original story at first. Um, so he's in there for the role of Tinkerbell. They initially wanted Carrie Fisher to do it. Carrie Fisher playing Princess Leia uh, was on a roll at this time when they wanted her to do it in the 80s. But by 1991, she was struggling with drug problems. She wasn't in any position to do it. I think she only did like one movie that year. She was the friend in Drop Dead Fred around that time. Carrie Fisher, we talked about it when we did the Star Wars review. She had a hard life after Star Wars. She never really achieved much success after that. So they switched her out for Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts was on a roll at this time, Pretty Woman, all these other things, and it would seem like that she would be perfect for Tinkerbell. So they put her in as Tinkerbell. Bob Hoskins, who had just started Who Framed Roger Rabbit, uh, he's put in the role as Smee, and then they have their cast, or so they think. But they wanted somebody who would later become one of the biggest Hollywood stars ever. And that person is Leonardo DiCaprio. They wanted him as Peter Pan's son, Jack, in the movie, but he turned it down. So they got another. They got man, guys. I'm looking for the kid's name. Who they got as Peter Pan's son? They got Charlie Corsmo, Charlie Corsmo as Peter Pan's son. They should have gone with Leonardo DiCaprio. They should have went with Leo. because that kid Charlie Cosmo was shit. He was one of the worst actors. But so now that the cast is complete, they go to filming, and they overspend in this movie. The budget for this film is big, and they actually shoot on the lot, on the same lot. So check this one out, and David, they shoot this movie on the same lot that they shot 1939's Wizard of Oz. On so they have high expectations for this film. You know what I'm saying? They want it to be like another, like this generation's Wizard of Oz. They really wanted to be something special. They hired John Williams. John Williams is, of course, the director of all the music in Star Wars. He's basically the man responsible for the music that you hear in Star Wars. Every yes, and we'll get into that. We'll get into this is part of the reason. Lisa's correct. It's part of the reason why the movie did not do so well. I believe they said that lot is cursed. So John Williams agrees to do the score. He's done all the Star Wars movies. He's associated completely with Star Wars, some of the most iconic film movies in history. How can this go wrong? You have Robin Williams, you have Julia Roberts, you have Steven Spielberg, you have John Williams, you have everybody. You know what I mean? A classic story. What can possibly go wrong? Well, the answer is everything. From the alligator not working in the Neverland scene where Peter's supposed to be eaten, to Julia Roberts showing up unprepared, drunk at times, and arguing with everybody because something was going on in her personal life. She was dating at the time Kiefer Sutherland. Many don't know who he is. Think of 24. He plays the role of Jack Bauer. And they were engaged to be married. And he cheated on her. And the engagement was called off at the same time that they're shooting the movie. So she's pissed off. She's cursing everybody out. She refuses to do her lines. She's showing up drunk. She's showing up belligerent. You know? And Robin Williams is not feeling well either. He struggles famously with depression. That's the reason why he passed away. He's arguing with Dustin Hoffman about the lines, and he's not getting along with some of his castmates. You know what I mean? So initially starting off, that's how we start. So what about the movie itself? Okay, let's get into the plot. We start off with the exact premise. There's a play. The little girl's having a play. Peter Banning, the Robin Williams plays the part. He has two children, Maggie. Yes, exactly. It was snake bit. It was snake bit, Lise. It was cursed. He's on a plane, right? And they're flying to London. But before they're doing that, they're actually watching the play, Peter and Wendy. And he gets a call from his people. He works as a lawyer. So he gets a call from the people, and they need him for a meeting. But Jack says, "What about my baseball game?" Because every time he promises Jack that he's going to go to his baseball game, he always misses his baseball game. He's like, this was a typical trope in the 90s of movies that were made about fathers they weren't absentee fathers. They weren't like baby daddy type shit, like especially if they were white. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? African American characters, we know racism, a different story. But like if they were white, they weren't absentee fathers, but they were like always working, right? They were workaholic dads. You see this in like Jim Carrey's Liar Liar, and you see this here. So this was the case with Peter Banning. He's always working. He's a corporate lawyer, right? And he says, I promise you, I will make the game. I will attend the game. So, needless to say, the game happens. Peter is not there. You know what I'm saying? The mother is there. Peter is not there. And to top it all off, the kid loses the game. you know, you know what I mean? So it is what it is. But the family has to fly out to London because they're doing a special dinner for Maggie Smith's character, Wendy Moira Angela Darling. Now, the daughter, being as she's whimsical and she's a child, and the son are playing on the plane, but Peter Banning is afraid of flying. He's terrified of flying. Imagine that. You're actually Peter Pan, but you're afraid to fly. You know what I mean? You're scared of the air. Where the kids are messing around, they're playing around, horse playing, kicking the seat and everything. And he's just like, he's scared shit. So, so they finally go to London. And here they are in London. And the daughter asked a question that everybody's wondering. She said, is Grandma Wendy the real Wendy from my play? And the father says, no, she's not. Of course not. That's just a fairy tale. That's just a story. Right? And then we're introduced to, the house attendants and everything. And Maggie Smith comes down and she's Wendy. And, he's standing there. And he's actually standing there in his Peter Pan pose. And she calls him boy. And she comments how how the kids have grown. And then Jack is describing his father's job as a corporate lawyer. And Wendy is shocked because she's like, Peter, you've become a pirate. Basically, you've become everything that you swore to fight against. Peter just ignores it, right? They they tuck the kids in. They go to the dinner honoring Wendy because Wendy is being honored by the Orphan Society because she has taken in so many orphans over the years. You know what I mean? Including Peter, right? So, but there is a disturbance, and the disturbance is that Captain Hook has come to London and he kidnaps the kids, Peter Pan's children, and he whisks them off to Neverland. So when they come back, the guy that one of the orphans, Toodles, that Wendy has taken in, he says, I lost my marbles, right? He's going around, and this is something that yeah, I did, David. He's going around, I lost my marbles. This is something that he does all the time. You know what I mean? It has a double meaning. He's lost his mind / his marbles, right? So, but he's going around now saying that Captain Hook came and took the kids. And Wendy knows it's true, but she knows what Peter must do, but Peter doesn't even know how to do it. He doesn't even know how to get to Neverland. He can't even get to Neverland because in order to get to Neverland, you have to be able to fly, and he can't fly anymore, right? So she brings him in. She brings out Jim Barry's book. She was reading it to the girl before they went to the party. She reads it to Peter Pan. She shows him pictures of him when he was a boy in the book. And she says, my Peter, you've forgotten who you are. And he goes, what are you talking about? Like, are you crazy, old lady? Right? And she's like, Peter, you're Peter Pan. You are You are the you're Peter Pan. He's like, man, this lady's crazy, right? So he starts drinking, and who appears to him is Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell, played by Julia Roberts. You know, we couldn't see in the movie any evidence of what they were talking about that was happening behind the scenes, because she's really good in this movie. She's really funny and all that. She receives a Razzie, like, which is the bad equivalent of the Oscars, the worst performance for this. But to me, she was pretty good. She knocks him out. She sprinkles pixie dust on him, and they go flying to Neverland. Now, this is an interesting part. They fly over London Bridge, and below them, you can, if you peek in really closely, you can see a couple kissing, and the couple kissing, believe it or not, is George Lucas and Carrie Fisher. So yes, guys, Princess Leia and the director of Star Wars and the father of Star Wars, George Lucas and Carrie Fisher, are actually kissing in this movie uh, on London Bridge as Tinkerbell is flying Peter Pan to Neverland. So yeah, they get to Neverland, and you know, and the pirates have captured him. They're making fun of him because he's fat, he's out of shape, he's old, and Captain Hook has challenged him to a fight, challenged him to a duel because at one time Captain Hook, of course, he lost his hand to in a battle to Peter. And then people are like, Peter Pan has children? Like, are you kidding me? You're not Peter Pan. You're not the real Peter Pan. So he's embarrassed. He doesn't know what to make of the situation. He doesn't even know where he's at. And let me tell you, Neverland looks spectacular. Like the special effects in this movie, great. You know what I'm saying? Like really great. And so Tinkerbell says, you know what we got to do? Give me 3 days. Give me 3 days to take him back to where the Lost Boys are, and I will get him ready for this duel. I will retrain. I'll train him again. So they take him back to where the Lost Boys are, but a lot has changed since he's been gone. He's been gone for years, and they have a new leader, and that new leader is Rufio. Rufio, played by Dante Briscoe, is the new leader. He's the new Pan. He says, uh, who are you? You're pathetic. You can't fight, you can't fly, and you can't crow. Who are you? Just some fat, middle-aged, ugly guy. You know what I mean? You can't even beat me in a duel, and you want to take on Captain James Hook? Who do you think you are? So the Lost Boys, they have a hell of a task when it comes to this. Because how do they get this guy in this fat middle-aged guy in shape to fight Captain Hook in 3 days? Now, this always boggled my mind because the logistics of it. Um, the logistics of it are basically that if there's no time in Neverland, how do they know when 3 days are? You know what I mean? Now there's obviously no time in Neverland because if there were, people would get old, right? So that's one of the unanswered questions, movie logic, whatever, right? But while this is happening, Hook is panicking. He basically almost tries to commit suicide. Basically, he has like suicidal ideations and shit because he wants to figure out a way that he can infiltrate Peter Pan's family. So what he does is he starts to appeal to Jack's frustration because Jack is still frustrated that Peter is the father that he is. You know what I mean? A shitty dad. You know what I mean? So he tells him, listen, I will organize a baseball league for you, and I will I will become the father basically that you don't have. He tries to convince Maggie the same thing, but Maggie's not having it. She's like, she's like, you know what? I'm not listening to you. Like, I, I love my dad and only my dad. But then again, Maggie hadn't gone through the kind of things that Jack had gone through. She's much younger. She's more, she's more naive, as it were. So she's not feeling as dejected or as rejected as Jack is. Jack, they eventually have the mock baseball game. And this is when Peter sees this, because they go to spy on Captain Hook's men. When Peter sees this, he's like, and he sees how happy Jack seems to be with Hook. He's like, oh man, maybe I was a terrible dad, because Jack hits a home run and Captain Hook is happy and surprised, and he's like, that's my Jack. And then Robin Williams says into himself as he's watching this, he goes, no, that's my Jack. Yeah. So now he knows what he must do. He knows he's got to whip himself into shape. Initially, he didn't want to fight Captain Hook. He was against the whole idea. He's like, "What is Tinkerbell getting me into?" But he doesn't. They try to have him do runs around and everything. But the key is that he's missing, and this one scene captures it uh, so so succinctly. Is that he's missing the key ingredient that made Peter Pan Peter Pan, and that's imagination. Um, Nobody has ever had. You can't have Peter Pan without imagination. So they're having a dinner, right? And like they're having like this big feast, a lot of bowls and everything laid out, a lot of plates, but there's no food on it. There's no food on the table. So he's like, "How are we gonna eat? There's no food here, right?" But they start imagining food, and as they imagine the food, there's this big elaborate layout of a bunch of food, and then they even have a food fight. So you see Peter slowly begin to regain who he was, discover who he was, his true self, right? But it's still not really working, and it's still not really clicking for him to become Peter Pan. But what eventually happens is one of the kids, and this is a great scene. One of the kids, one of the Lost Boys, actually takes off his glasses and stretches out his face, and he says, "Wait a minute, I could see elements of you when you were younger." And he goes, "You are Peter."